Ooh, that is good. Get another one of those. Okay, I'd like to stop, but I can't because I'm closing an important thought. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Human beings subscribe. This is a question. Human beings subscribe to one or more of these stories of creation. What do you think we are looking for when we subscribe to one of these myths? Answer. I think what we're looking for is a way of experiencing the world that will open us to the transcendent, that will open to us the transcendent that informs it, and at the same time forms ourself within it. That is what people want. That is what the soul asks for. Question. You mean we are looking for some accord with the mystery that informs all things? What do you call that vast, what you call that vast ground of silence which we all share? Answer. Yes, but not only to find it, but to find it actually in our environment, in our world, to recognize it, to have some kind of instruction that will enable us to experience the divine presence in the world and in us. Yeah, I can't skip it. I want. I'm trying to. In India, there is a beautiful greeting in which the palms are placed together and you bow to the other person. The position of the palms together, this we use when we pray, do we not? That is a greeting which says that the God that is in you recognizes the God in the other. These people are aware of the divine presence in all things. When you enter an Indian home as a guest, you are greeted as a visiting deity. Question, but weren't those the people who told these stories, who believed them and acted on them? Weren't the people who told those stories asking simpler questions? Weren't they asking, for example, who made the world? How was the world made? Why was the world made? Aren't those the questions that the creation stories are trying to address? Answer. No. It's through that answer that they see that the Creator is present in the whole world. You see what I mean? This story from the Upanishads that we just read, I see that I am this creation, says the God. When you see that God is a creation and that you are the creature, you realize that God is within you and in the man or woman with whom you are talking as well. So there is a realization of two aspects of the one divinity. There is a basic mythological motif that originally all was one, and then there was separation, heaven and earth, male and female, and so forth. How did we lose touch with the unity? One thing you can say is that the separation was somebody's fault. They ate the wrong fruit or said the wrong words to God, so that he got angry and then he went away. So now the eternal is somehow away from us, and we have to find a way to get back in touch with it. There is another theme in which man is thought of as having come not from above, but from the womb of Mother Earth. Often in these stories, there's a great ladder or rope up which people climb. The last people to want to get out are two great big fat heavy people. They climb the rope and snap, it breaks. So we are separated from our source. In a sense, because of our minds, we actually are celebrated. And the problem is to reunite that broken core. There are times, you know what this all sounds like? It all sounds like fairy tales that you read to kids to try to get them to understand that the sun is actually burning in the sky, right? That's what all this sounds like to me. There are times when I think maybe primitive men and women were just telling these stories to entertain themselves. No, they are not entertainment stories. We know that they are not entertainment stories because they can be told only at certain times of the year and under certain conditions. They are two orders of myths. The great myths, like the myth of the Bible, for example, are the myths of the temple, of the great sacred rituals. They explain the rites by which the people are living in harmony with themselves and with each other and with the universe. The understanding of these stories as allegorical is normal. Question: you think that the first humans who told the story of the creation had some intuitive awareness of their allegorical nature of these stories? Answer: yes. They were saying it as if it were thus. The notion that somebody literally made the world, that is what is known as artificialism. It is the child's way of thinking. The table is made, so somebody made the table. The world is here, so somebody must have made it. There's another point of view involving emanation and precipitation without personification. A sound precipitates air, then fire, then water and earth, and that's how the world becomes. The whole universe is included in this first sound, this vibration, which then commits all things to fragmentation in the field of time. In this view, there is not something outside who said, let it happen. In most cultures, there are two or three creation stories, not just one. There are two in the Bible, even though people treat them as one story. You remember in the Garden of Eden story, chapter 2, God is trying to think of ways to entertain Adam, whom he has created to be his gardener, to take care of his garden. That is an old, old story that was borrowed from ancient Sumer. The gods wanted somebody to take care of their garden and cultivate the food that they needed, so they created man. That's the background of the myth of chapters 2 and 3 in Genesis. But Yahweh's gardener is bored, so God tries to invent toys for him. He creates the animals, but all the man can do is name them. Then God thinks of this grand idea of drawing the soul of woman out of Adam's own body, which is a very different creation story from chapter 1 of Genesis, where God created Adam and Eve together in the image of himself as male and female. There, God is himself the primordial androgyny. Chapter 2 is by far the earlier story, coming from perhaps the 8th century or so BC, whereas chapter 1 is of a so called priestly text of about the 4th century BC or later. In the Hindu story of the self that felt fear, then desire, then split in two, we have a counterpart in Genesis 2. In Genesis, it is man, not the God, who splits in two. The Greek legend that Aristophanes tells in Plato's Symposium is another of this kind. Aristophanes says that in the beginning there were creatures composed of what are now two human beings, and those were of three sorts: male, male female, male male, and female female. The gods then split them all in two, but after they had been split apart, all they could think of to do was to embrace each other again in order to reconstitute the original units. Oh. So we all now spend our lives trying to find and re embrace our other halves. This is amazing. Question: you say that mythology is a study of mankind's one great story. What is that one great story? Answer: that we have come forth from the ground, from the one ground of being, as manifestations in the field of time. The field of time is a kind of shadow play over a timeless ground, and you play the game in the shadow field. You enact your side of polarity with all your might, but you know that your enemy, for example, is simply on the other side of what you see as yourself, if you could see from the position of the middle. Question: so, the one great story is our search to find our place in the drama. Answer: to be in accord with the grand symphony that this world is, to put harmony in our own body in accord with that harmony. Question: when I read these stories, no matter the origin or cult or no matter the culture or origin, I feel a sense of wonder at the spectacle of the human imagination groping to try to understand this existence, to invest in their small journey these transcendence possibilities. Has this ever happened to you? Answer: we've already done this. We've already done this, so I think we might. Ooh. Okay. Yeah. So I think this was one of the earlier breaks. How we doing? Yeah, I think this is one of the earlier breaks. You should remember this. I said this earlier. Far from undermining my faith, your work in mythology has liberated my faith from the cultural prisons to which it has been sentenced. Answer: it liberated my own. And I know it is going to do that with anyone who gets the message. Question: are some myths more true than others? Answer: they are all true in different senses. Every mythology has to do with the wisdom of life as related to a specific culture at a specific time. It integrates the individual into his society and the society into the field of nature. It unites the field of nature with my nature. It is a harmonizing force. Our own mythology, for example, is based on the idea of duality, good and evil, heaven and hell. And so our religions tend to be ethical in their assent, in their accent. Sin and atonement, right and wrong. The tension of opposites, love, hate, death, life. Okay, answer. Ramakrishna once said that if you all think that if all you think of are your sins, then you are a sinner. And when I read that, I thought of my boyhood, going to confession on Saturdays, meditating on all the little sins I committed during the week. Now I think one should go and say, "Bless me, Father, for I have been great. These are the good things I've done this week." Identify your notion of yourself with the positive rather than the negative. You see, religion is really a kind of second womb. It is designed to bring this extremely complicated thing, which is a human being, to maturity, which means to be self motivating, self acting. But the idea of sin puts you in a servile condition throughout your life. Question. But that's not the Christian idea of creation and fall. Answer. I once heard a lecture by a wonderful old Zen philosopher, Dr. D.T. Suzuki. He stood up with his hands, slowly rubbing his sides, and said, "God against man, man against God, man against nature, nature against man, nature against God, God against nature. Very funny religion." Question. Well, I've often wondered, what would a member of a hunting tribe on the North American plains think gazing up on Michelangelo's creation? Answer. That is certainly not the God of the other traditions. In other mythologies, one puts oneself in accord with the world, with the mixture of good and evil. But in the religious system of the Near East, you identify with the good and fight against the evil. The biblical traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all speak with derogation of the so called nature religions. The shift from a nature religion to a sociological religion makes it difficult for us to link back to nature, but actually, all of those cultural symbols are perfectly susceptible to interpretation in terms of psychological and cosmological systems, if you choose to look at them that way. Every religion is true, one way or another. It is true when understood metaphorically, but when it gets stuck to its own metaphors, interpreting them as facts, then you are in trouble. Question. What is a metaphor? A metaphor is an image that suggests something else. For instance, if I say to a person, "You are a nut," I am not suggesting that I think the person is literally a nut. Nut is a metaphor. The reference of a metaphor in religious traditions is to something transcendent that is not literally anything. If you think that the metaphor is itself the reference, it would be like going to a restaurant, asking for the menu, seeing beefsteak written there, and starting to eat the menu. For example, Jesus ascended to heaven. The denotation would seem to be that someone ascended to the sky. That is literally what is being said. But if that were really the meaning of the message, then we would have to throw it away because there would have been no place for Jesus literally to go. We know that Jesus could not have ascended to heaven because there is no physical heaven anywhere in the universe. Even ascending at the speed of light, Jesus would still be in the galaxy. Astronomy and physics would simply would Astronomy and physics have simply eliminated that as a literal physical possibility. But if you read Jesus ascended to heaven in terms of its metaphorical connotation, you see that he has gone inward, not into outer space, but into inward space, to the place from which all being comes, into the consciousness that is the source of all things, the kingdom of heaven within. The images are outward, but their reflection is inward. The point is that we should ascend with him by going inward. It is a metaphor of returning to the source, Alpha and Omega, of leaving the fixation on the body behind and going to the body's dynamic source. Question: aren't you undermining one of the great traditional doctrines of the classic Christian faith, that the burial and the resurrection of Jesus prefigures our own? Answer: that would be a mistake in the reading of the symbol. That is reading the words in terms of prose instead of in terms of poetry. Reading the metaphor in terms of denotation instead of connotation. And poetry gets to the unseen reality. Answer: that which is beyond even the concept of reality, that which transcends all thought. The myth puts you there all the time, gives you a line to connect with that mystery which you are. Shakespeare said that art is a mirror held up to nature, and that's what it is. The nature is your nature. And all of these wonderful poetic images of mythology are referring to something in you. When your mind is simply trapped by the image out there so that you never make reference to yourself, you've misread the image. I know he's right. The inner world is the world of your requirements and your energies and your structure and your possibilities that meets the outer world. The outer world is the field of your incarnation. That's where you are. You've got to keep both going. As novelist said, the seat of the soul is there where the inner and outer worlds meet.